welcome. So today we're going to talk about how to design scalable legal services. My name is Dave McCann. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success here at Clio. First off, I just personally wanted to apologize to all of you. I like to offer help, and a number of you have asked for help with directions at the Gaylord this week, and I'm pretty sure I've sent a lot of you to the wrong location. Sorry, and I blame GPS and the Gaylord. We're going to talk a lot about technology and how wonderful it is. GPS is sort of the bane of my existence in terms of how I used to be great with directions and maps, and now I have a hard time finding my way out of a room. So that is kind of how, that for me is going to be one of my challenges today as we talk about tech. The rest of the tech we're going to talk about today is all going to be awesome. So we are excited to have you here. I hope everyone is having a fantastic ClioCon. For me, this is my first time in person. It has been energizing and fantastic to spend time with each of you. I hope you guys are getting a lot out of it, and we're really excited to do this again next year and going forward. Love to meet more of you tonight and for the rest of the conference. Looking forward to that as well. So just before we get going, and I realize a lot of you are coming back from lunch, and I want to make this a little interactive. I was hoping to just get kind of a sense for the audience today. So going to have a couple questions. Would love to get people to raise their hands so we can get a feel for things. We're going to do our best to try to see, even though it feels like we might be getting called to the afterlife with these lights. So first off, how many of you are solo practitioners? Can I get a raise of hand? Awesome. How many of you are running firms of, say, 5 or less people? How many of you are running firms bigger than that? Good mix in the audience. In terms of how long you've been practicing, how many of you have been practicing less than 5 years? Less than 10? More than 10. Awesome. Very, very cool. So we are going to jump into things. We have a fantastic panel here today. We have Jess Birkin, and we have Timothy Parlator. I'm going to make this fairly interactive. We're going to start off with some questions that we've sort of prepared, but I'm looking forward to getting questions from the audience as well. We're going to set time aside for that as we go. So with that, we're going to start to kick things off. I'm going to first ask you guys more just like an introduction question. As you were thinking about kind of the profession of law, what was sort of the inspiration? Why did you decide that's what you wanted to do? And I'll kick it off with Jess first.
Why did I decide to be a lawyer? Yeah. Somehow in my early 20s, I thought I had 2 options, and they were to go to grad school for sociology, social work, or be a lawyer. I don't know why I thought that was a binary decision. I think I wanted to help people, and then I was like, I'd like to also make money, so let's go with lawyer.
Okay.
Making decisions in your 20s, you know?
Awesome. And Tim?
So I didn't originally start out to be a lawyer. I went to the U.S. Naval Academy undergrad with the intent to spend a career in the Navy, and it was my junior year when my best friend got in trouble for something that he didn't really do what they claimed he did. And he came to me, and we sat down and we put together a defense. I know this sounds very My Cousin Vinny-ish, but we put together a defense. And I said, okay.
Put together a defense.
Yes, exactly. So this is what you got to do. Go argue this. And he looks at me and says, Tim, I have no idea what the hell you just said. And so the 2 of us went up to the commandant's judge advocate. I explained the thing to him, and he's like, oh, okay. So he went from about to get kicked out to, did a few marching tours. As of today, he is commanding the newest guided missile destroyer in the U.S. Navy. So he's still in. And I decided, you know what, I'm a whole lot better at this, so I'm going to go this direction instead.
Nice. When I was in high school, I thought about going to the academy, and I remember like meeting some folks from the Naval Academy, and they were talking it up, and I kept stressing to them, I don't know how to swim. I don't think the Naval Academy is a good thing for me to be in. Awesome. So one of the things, like when you're coming out of law school and you're thinking about what you want to do, there's obviously a lot of different approaches that people take. Both of you decided to start your own practice. And as you were doing that, what was kind of the thought process going on there? That can be a fairly risky undertaking, like there's a lot of other approaches. How did you guys sort of think through that decision? Let's start with Tim.
So I started my own practice a couple of times. So when I first came out of law school, I was doing criminal defense work in New York City, working for some older lawyers, the legends of the old John Gotti era. Doing some fun organized crime work. I then left that to go start a solo practice and kind of replicate the same thing. I then went to join a much larger firm. I was with a firm called Fisher Broyles for about 3 years, and they were the originators of the cloud-based law firm model. I loved what they did. They just recently joined the AmLaw 200. But as they got close to joining the AmLaw 200, we had a divergence of philosophy because they wanted AmLaw 200 caliber clients. They didn't like mine. One day they told me, Tim, we just can't afford the reputational risk of being seen as representing the little guy against the big guy. And I said, well, we have a difference of opinion. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back on my own. But instead of doing it solo this time, I'm going to build a new cloud-based law firm and focus it on an entirely different set of clients.
Very cool. And Jess?
So I'm in the position of having graduated right before the Great Recession. So I actually gave up on being a lawyer because there were no jobs, and took a job. First I went back to school and I got a master's in nonprofit management. Because I thought, well, this lawyer thing's never working out. Then I got a job in-house at a national nonprofit where I worked for a while before I left to partner with another woman who was working with nonprofits as clients. Then I was the managing partner at that firm because it was just two of us, and I realized we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I want to have a work-life integration, not, grind out 80 hours a week. And so I left to start my own firm. And I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years now. Awesome. So it's a little bit of a windy path.
It's always interesting just to see how, when you're younger and you start off, everyone assumes you have this perfect path and it's just gonna work out. I'm just gonna do this and then I'm gonna do that. And then as you go along, it just doesn't seem to work out that way. You're kind of interested in the nonprofit space. It's kind of and how you've sort of moved your practice into supporting them. Can you tell us a little bit more about your clients?
So my clients are typically small nonprofits. Think your local church, pet rescue, youth athletic league. Some of them are larger financially, but a lot of them have a small nonprofit mindset. They're very scrappy and they're very boots on the ground, not a large C-suite, big bureaucratic structure. So I'm kind of helping the smallest nonprofits because all nonprofits are regulated the same and they have more in common with a Fortune 500 company than a lemonade stand. So I'm trying to give those smaller groups access to the knowledge they need to deal with all the IRS regs.
Cool, excellent. And Tim, can you provide a little bit more background on how your firm is growing and what types of clients you're supporting?
Sure. So, what I did was about 4 years ago, I started the firm on an entirely cloud-based structure where everybody would work remotely. 4 years ago, pre-pandemic.
Before pandemic.
When everybody thought that was not something that would necessarily work. My vision for it was to build a firm that was full service, that would have people from all the different practice areas and from all the different jurisdictions, where we could essentially have an AmLaw 200 type firm, but giving access to an entirely different class of clients. Because When everybody works remote and you get rid of the single largest piece of overhead for any firm, which is maintaining an office, you can pass that savings on to the client. And the reality is the client doesn't care whether you're sitting in an office or whether you're sitting in your home. And, my office, I have a space in my home, so I get the tax benefit of that. On my business cards and everything, the website, it looks like I'm sitting on the 85th floor of #1 World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. It's a mailbox that costs me $150 a month. And so doing that, we first are able to cut what the legal fees are to make it a lot more affordable to the clients. Two, it allowed me to hire an entirely different group of attorneys. And so a lot of my hiring efforts focus on attorneys that are traditionally discriminated against, not wanted by the traditional firms, a lot of them because of geography. So about a third of my attorneys are currently married to active duty military, so they don't live where their licenses are. I would say probably 60% of my attorneys are women with small children, who then have the flexibility to be able to, make their own schedule, work from home, be able to have, that work-life balance. And so really it gave me a great opportunity for growth in that I could tap into a lot of really talented people that nobody else was looking at all. And so with that, you then build this whole team where right now I have 30 attorneys, still growing. I want to get to 300 someday. And we have everything. We have corporate, we have intellectual property, employment, litigation, criminal, all across the board. And so our clients are extremely diverse, where we have everything from entrepreneurs who want a one-stop shop at an affordable rate that they can do everything to build their business. We have people facing serious criminal charges. We really have a very wide client base.
That's super interesting because we have a bunch of stuff in common and a bunch of stuff that's like totally opposite. So I'm all cloud-based. I'm also working with one of my selling points, because obviously when you work with nonprofits, you ain't paying the top dollar on your salaries. Flexible schedules, remote locations, wherever you are is fine. I feel like I'm losing my mic, sorry. And that provides all of the flexibility and allows me to keep my costs down so I can pass that on to my nonprofit clients. But I'm not trying to get to 300 lawyers. I'm like, scaling for me is how many nonprofits can I serve with the least amount of humans possible, which is where that's an interesting, we're looking at scaling, I think, pretty differently.
Yeah, and
it's almost like he knew that when he decided to put us together on this stage.
I'm not going to say that wasn't intentional. One of the things I wanted to kind of build off of that in terms of thinking about technology and how you guys sort of designed your practices. When you started off, and Tim, it kind of sounds like you were very intentional about this, but a lot of times I think people tend to stumble into technology and this will help, this will help.
Right.
When you laid out your plan, did you kind of have a set of, I want this tech to make this work, or was it still like, hey, I like this concept, but how am I going to do it?
Because I had been at Fisher Bros for 3 years, and they, at the time, when I joined them, they had about 160 lawyers. When I left, they had 250. And so they had a very mature cloud-based model there. And so I was able to take a lot of the lessons learned from that I knew what worked, I knew what didn't, I knew how I wanted to improve upon the model. And one of their biggest drawbacks was that they built a cloud-based law firm back in 2004. And so before a lot of the technologies existed, so they invested a lot of money. They got into a lot of now antiquated, but at the time cutting edge technology that they were then in long-term contracts on that they'd spent a lot of money on. So I went into it with a certain mindset of, when I was a solo, I did all this stuff on my laptop, and billing software was Excel spreadsheets. And I knew what they had, and so I started looking, and this is the part you're gonna like, because I started looking and I discovered this thing called Clio.
We didn't tell him to say that.
But, in doing it at an age when Clio existed and a lot of these other providers existed, it really enabled me to figure it out. And I left that firm in August, and I didn't start recruiting until December. And I took that period of time to just sit down and focus on how best to build this, what is the best infrastructure to put in place. And, for that time, I continued to practice as a solo practitioner for my clients, but I massively overbuilt a solo practice for the purpose of it being able to expand, from 1 to 2 to 10, and eventually get to 300. And so, it was very intentional with taking, Clio as the backbone of everything, Clio and Microsoft Office, and then adding on pieces to that. And certainly coming to ClioCons and going around all the different booths downstairs to figure out other pieces to add is very helpful. But it was all very, very intentional of how to build that, and then I codified it into a partner manual for all of our attorneys.
And Jess, when you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, one of the things on the tech side that I was just surprised with is how it had evolved for you and like all the different ways and how intentional you were about it. Especially as a solo with the challenges of not having a lot of like support staff around you to help with that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey, as well as maybe some advice you would give to some of the other solos here of how they can think about tech and how it can help them.
Well, I think you have to, if you're here, you're open to being a cloud-based practice, right? So that's number one. So good on you for being open to being paperless, or at least as paperless as you can be. That is like the thing that I think leveraged my firm the most. But then it's really like when you are a solo especially, the idea of hiring somebody is sort of terrifying. There's wage and hour laws. Am I going to be able to pay them? Do I actually have enough work for them? Are they going to do everything to my standards? Oh my God, it's going to be so much work to train these people. So I started delegating to software. And that's actually like a really good first step. And I just ultimately started having like a philosophy that if a robot can do this for me, I shouldn't pay a human to do it. Yep. And so being able to use like online scheduling and having e-sign and all of the, outsourcing my bookkeeping, anything I could get off my plate. Bookkeeping went to a bookkeeper, not to a robot, but anything that I could kind of get off my plate to someone else became like my best friend. And I would say that's still a really valuable thing. Even though I have 2 half-time paralegals and I have an associate and I have an admin, if I see somebody doing something repetitively over and over again, my first thought is, oh, that could be an automated email. Or, oh, I bet there's an app for that. Just trying to get your mind into that mode is really, really important. And not to be, we're the shills for Clio up here, but once you're using a tool that is like, hey, we can integrate with all these things, it just starts to make you think about, well, could I do my intake with that thing that integrates with this? Like, is there a way that I could make this more efficient? And so just the best advice I can give you is to stay open to, changing and being anti-fragile, right? Being nimble and like, yes, we've always done our intake this one way, but maybe there is another way, and maybe it would actually help me serve more people more quickly, because you can't bill for intake. If you're an hourly biller, look at the things that you can't bill for that are sucking up all your time, right? So I really just think like on a 30,000 foot level, thinking about how you can delegate to the technology is the biggest thing. Because I feel like that's where we get stuck a lot as lawyers.
Awesome. And when I So like just kind of building on that a little bit and just thinking about scale. So in your circumstance, like what are you like when you're kind of looking out, what are you kind of envisioning as scale for you? Like what would be an ideal circumstance for you, like say 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe in 5-year plans after living through the Great Recession. Like, I was like, I'm going to do this, and my next 5 years look like that. And then the bottom fell out of the economy. So I really am just looking at, like, there's a great commencement speech by Neil Gaiman, if you know who that is. He's an author. He wrote the Sandman comics and a bunch of really good books. But he talks about what is moving towards the mountain. And trying to like always be taking work or things that are moving you toward the mountain and not away from the mountain. And so for me, it's, my mission with my firm is, I empower nonprofits to achieve their mission by doing things right. So it's like, what am I doing that's moving me towards that? And in the next 5 years, what I'm hoping to do is provide good enough services to as many small nonprofits as possible, even if I'm not personally or no lawyer is serving them. So like I have a subscription-based program, my white glove service clients pay a higher price. I'm now building something that is like a very low cost and it's hands-off, no actual legal representation unless you want to upgrade. So it's sort of like, how can I get even more of the little nonprofits served? What that looks like over the next 5 years, I don't know.
And then, Tim, like your circumstances, you've mentioned a couple times how you want to build the 300. So as you think about how you put that plan in place, when you get there, how will you, like beyond knowing that you have 300 kind of attorneys, what will you kind of view as like, we're scaled, we're there?
I reserve the right to up the goal to 600 at that point. But look, 300 is just kind of a funny number to me. But it really, what is an ideal size and scale for me? I like to use that number, but the reality is to have all of the practice areas and all of the jurisdictions kind of covered so that there is little to nothing that comes in that we can't handle. That's really what it is. And, and at the same time, being able to provide, some phenomenal employment opportunities for people. I spoke about the attorneys, but, my support staff as well is all, made up of also people that would not necessarily get hired places. 100% of my support staff is married to active duty military as well. And so, and they've all kept their job through moves. They've been with me, and then they've had to move somewhere else, and they've been able to keep their jobs. So, that's an important thing to me. But what is our ultimate scale? Whatever the market will dictate. 300 is just kind of a funny number.
I think it's super interesting that your goal is to, like, whatever comes in the door, you would be able to do it. Because, like, my scale is to niche down even harder. Like, I just recently decided, like, I'm not going to take anything that's not core nonprofit services. Like, sometimes, unless you're like a white glove service client, and then it's like, oh, we have this goofy thing, great, I'll hire someone through lawclerk.legal to do this for me. But to like actually only focus on the super niche core services, that's it. It's just interesting that it's like totally different, but similar goal.
Well, and I do that at a different level because I encourage my people to focus like that. But what I like to have is I like to have this whole team. One of the things that I hated when I was a solo was people would come to me and they would present me with a problem that I had no clue how to handle, and I'd have to send it somewhere else.
Yep.
And one of the things I love about having a team like this is that there's very little that people present to us that I say, look, I really need to refer you out to someone else on that. And so we certainly do have, several niche practices within the firm. There's some people that are very, highly focused like that. But my view of scale is more on the people than the cases. That I want to be able to have this environment for more attorneys with a lot of niches, a mountain of niches, if you will.
So yesterday, like when you and I were talking, you had mentioned at a prior CleoCon that you had gotten some really great advice about sort of diversity and inclusion. And I'd love to hear, like, especially as you're talking about your talent, and you've mentioned about this a little bit, how your firm thinks about that and how it's helping you scale.
Sure. So I was telling them a story about the last in-person CleoCon in San Diego, where you have all these different sessions, and I went into a ballroom expecting to hear one particular topic, and I went into the wrong room. And as the woman got up and she said, "Okay, I'm here to talk about diversity and inclusion," and I said, "Oops, wrong spot." And I was about to stand up and leave, and I looked around the room like, I'm the only white male in the room. If I leave right now, this is going to look horrible. So I sat back, so I didn't stand up, but it was the single best speech I'd ever heard on the topic, because she took diversity and inclusion and separated them into different topics. And she talked about how, as a young woman attorney, that all of these firms, they like to hire a very diverse group of people, and so that first year associate class, they look like a rainbow. But what do they look like 7 years from then? And that as a woman with a child, she felt like she had to hide that aspect of her personal life from the partners because that would hinder her upward mobility. And when she finally got tired of it and decided, okay, I'm going to put a picture of my son on my desk, that's exactly what happened. The partner came in and said, "What's that?" And so she was saying that, diversity is being asked to the dance, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And I walked out of that session that I was accidentally in with so much of a better idea, because I immediately walked out and I got on the phone, I called my staff and I said, "Hey, we got to focus all of our stuff. I want to really push inclusion. Forget the whole diversity and inclusion thing. I really want to pound on inclusion, because that perfectly describes what we do here, because we do provide the ability for everybody to have a seat at the table. And I have a strong prejudice towards hiring women with small children, because they're very talented and nobody else wants them. So I do. We hire a lot of minority attorneys. I love all of the people that we're able to hire, because they provide such a better experience for the client without having to fit into the mold that traditional firm wants them to fit into. So through the accidental session, it really ramped up our, focus on inclusion.
And are you finding that that's enabling you to scale even faster?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some ways, it took things that I was innately doing anyway and kind of crystallized it and said, okay, now I can actually describe some of these things that we're doing and make it, something that I can explain better. But no, absolutely. I mean, I would say that, and in particular with my support staff, as I have been growing, I was outsourcing, bookkeeping and accounting and everything. And are there any accountants in the room? Okay, don't take this personally. I hate CPAs. They drive me out of my mind. But I haven't been able to find one I liked. And, we went through all these outside firms and they all drove me nuts. And I finally said, okay, why don't we hire somebody in-house? I want to find somebody who is an accountant who's married to somebody in the military, who has young kids, who hasn't worked in a couple of years, and is looking for a way back into the marketplace, but wants to start off as a part-time employee because her kids are still young. And I sent my admin team out with go find that person, and they found exactly that person for me. And I hired her, Lauren. Her husband is an Apache pilot in the Army. She has young kids. She had been out of it. She started as a part-time employee, grew with me, her position grew along with her availability based on her kids growing. At one point, I sat with her and I said, "Hey, what do you think about becoming a CPA?" And she said, "Well, that's always been a dream of mine, but ever since I met my husband, I realized that wasn't going to happen." Okay, well, guess what? I want you to become a CPA. And she had given up on that dream, and all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, I can actually do that while still moving around? Today, she's a CPA. And she is our in-house CPA. But I was only able to do that because I was able to take this person, from that very part-time job as the firm was still very young and didn't have all that accounting need, and have the position grow with her.
I think there's a couple of threads there that are like really similar between us, because I have had really good luck hiring people who have no prior experience whatsoever. They just have like great soft skills. And maybe I start someone as like a 10-hour-a-week paid intern and just like building up from there. And I think one of the threads there is doing things that are not the traditional like legal way, like the way it's always done. So just looking at, could I actually hire some kid right out of college or a stay-at-home mom instead of, I'm gonna go to the on-campus interviews and try and hire a law student. I've had like the worst luck with hiring law students. They just wanna IRAC everything and it's horrible. But like just thinking outside the box a little bit on who your team can be or what your tools can be, I think that's definitely a theme for scaling in a non-traditional way.
And sort of going back to some of the legal trends report, one of the things we're seeing is that this is another industry that's not really immune to the whole Great Resignation. And so the approaches that both of you are taking are really innovative. I would assume they're building great loyalty with the folks that you're working with because you're willing to invest in them and give them that chance. And I would assume that's helping you guys as you think about how you scale. Jess, there was something you brought up earlier, and we had talked about it when I met you a few weeks ago. And I just wanted to touch on it about how you're creating like services for your clients that enable them to not have to work directly with you, but can get legal services that they need. So it gives you more reach and more scale. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I've been trying to build sort of DIY, like do it yourself, document service company, but better products. So it's taking what's in my head and getting it out into basically a curriculum that would teach someone, you can hire me and pay premium for me to help you incorporate your nonprofit. I will craft a great purpose statement. But I mean, let's be real. I'm using my own template of the articles of incorporation, right? You're not hiring me for the template. You're hiring me because I'm going to hold your hand through that process. I'm going to answer all your questions. Yes, I'm going to write you a great purpose statement, but I could also just teach you how to write your own purpose statement. And so I'm trying to build online courses that people can, small nonprofits that can't afford to hire me or just want to do it on their own, can actually access what's in my head without having to enter into an expensive attorney-client relationship. And that doesn't mean that there aren't still people who want to hire me. There are. So I'm not really undercutting my sales. It's a different category of customer, really.
Do you find with those customers, is there a hesitancy? How are they sort of learning about your services?
Well, right now, a lot of people contact my firm and I do a lot of content marketing. I put out a lot of free stuff. I have a podcast. I have like all sorts of things out there that people can digest and use. And then they have an issue and they want to work with my firm, or they want information about how to work with my firm. So they're calling, and then they find out how much it's going to cost, and they're sort of like, oh, well, I wish I could hire you, but that's just like totally out of reach for our parent-teacher group. So at this point, it's a downsell. So they can't really afford the full service. But I'm also starting to experiment with more, promoted social posts and getting people into my email marketing campaign and just saying, you obviously are a DIYer based on the content that you like, so do you want to buy this? And that's an experiment we're starting to run now.
Awesome. One thing I was thinking about, as I was kind of, thinking about our session today, that I wanted to ask both of you. You're obviously fairly far along in your journey now, but if you were starting over, what is the advice you'd give to someone in that situation, like the mistakes that you made along the way that you wouldn't make today, or how would you do it differently?
Oh, can I go first?
Please.
Okay, so here's the thing. You're gonna have potentially a really good idea, especially if it's a legal product, and you're like, I know what these people need. I'm gonna sell them this thing that they need, and then you waste all this time and money building this thing, and you never asked a damn person if they actually would be willing to pay for it. It's not like I made that mistake or anything. That is a serious risk, because as attorneys, we often feel like, well, I know what the client needs, right? You need this. But the person with the problem doesn't always understand that your solution is what they need. And so you have to have, I think in business that's called product market fit or something, but you need to go talk to your clients and say, I made this. Is this something that would have helped you? Or talk to people that are in the world that are your potential customers and find out if it's actually something that they want. For you, every legal problem that comes in the door, you're going to have an answer to. For me, scaling with digital products and DIY stuff and creating access, it's a little bit of a different thing. So just test, keep it small, and test is my advice.
Yeah, just to add to that, obviously at Clio, we've been trying to solicit feedback from all of you on things we can do to improve our product, and we have a similar challenge. I think oftentimes we get really excited about something we want to build, and then we realize, oh, we missed that, or we need to tweak it. And so please continue to give us your feedback. It's so important, and to make sure that we are matching the product to your needs. And the advice and the thoughts that you provide us, they are listened to, and we are constantly looking for that. Tim, love to hear advice for how you would approach things today, lessons learned.
I would say that my biggest missed opportunities were in marketing. I would have put a lot more focus into marketing early on. I think I would say that I've had some missed opportunities where I could have done better, with that, and a lot of it is I would have spent more time to learn social media marketing myself. I hired a couple of people that didn't work out so well. The social media marketing people, and so now I'm actually following your example of, instead of hiring somebody who knows social media marketing, hiring somebody that I can trust and believes in our product and teach them social media marketing. But one of the things that, in addition to running this firm as a lawyer, I try a lot of very high profile criminal cases and civil litigation, and with a lot of media attention on it. And so there were definitely situations that I've had that I think if I had had a better marketing plan in place at the time, I could have capitalized on it a lot more. And, where I sit there today and think, my God, if I had had this team that could have actually promoted, was a couple of years ago, I was interviewed on 60 Minutes for a case that I did. And we did like one Facebook post about it, which in retrospect,
so much earned media.
I know. In retrospect, I've gotten plenty, and that's part of my problem is that as a criminal lawyer, I came up in the New York City system where we didn't really do any advertising, and my mentors always told me, you're not allowed to advertise. Advertising is bad. You're going to be one of those billboard lawyers, so don't do that. The only advertising you need is from the pages of the New York Post after you win acquittals. And that's what I had followed for a while. And so, now if I could go back in time and, kind of slap myself 4 years ago, I would have said, hey, focus on marketing now.
Yeah.
And I think that if I had done that, I would have had a lot more growth. And so certainly that's my focus for 2023 is marketing.
Awesome. And like figuring out who your target customer is, because I feel like, I don't know what you do because you got everybody, but like after this, go to Justy Nichols' session on client intake and converting leads because she's going to talk about this stuff. But it's like, if you're trying to scale, you can't be for everybody. Like I could see you having like an amazing marketing campaign just around the amount of like veteran families that your firm has. That's a huge appeal for like people who are veterans and all of that stuff, right? So that could be a tactic that you take, I don't know. But like scaling doesn't just mean it's more and we're for everyone and it's all the things. Like you have to like have a message. So don't just think about scaling as like more. It's like more of what? More of what you like, more of what makes you the most money, more of your favorite clients. I think sometimes lawyers are just sort of like, well, more would be good. We need to think about it more than that.
I obviously want to throw it open to the audience for questions, but I do want to do a follow-up on that just quickly before we do that. How do you guys strike balance and like you're scaling, you're like trying to strike balance. How do you both personally strike balance to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed with the more and find yourselves like completely exhausted? Jess?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. I think as attorneys, a lot of us are overachievers, so it's really easy to get really bogged down with all of the stuff. So I try to recognize when something can be delegated. I try and listen to my team when they're telling me you should be delegating that. And, just recognizing when the little signs of burnout are creeping in for myself or my staff especially, because I have such a small staff at this point that it is very disruptive to have turnover. I had somebody go out on maternity leave. I have a team of 5, and it was like, oh my God, the world is ending. So, just the churn is difficult. So to retain people, because if you're going to scale, you have to retain people. Otherwise, you blow all your time on turnover. So just making sure that you're staying conscious of not burning people out, I think, and making people take days off, making yourself take days off, setting good boundaries around when you answer the phone and email and things like that.
And Tim?
My biggest problem with balance is always making sure that I'm spending the right amount of time managing the firm and being a lawyer. And we talked about this yesterday at lunch. I want to try and spend more time focusing on managing the firm and growing the firm. But at the same time, with my particular scenario, I need to keep going into the court, because if I'm not out there in a courtroom swinging a battle axe around, the clients won't be calling. And we do have our marketing, but we also get a lot of attention from just media attention on cases that I do. And so I need to keep that balance. And one of the things I've been trying to focus a lot more on is having all the other people work with me on these cases so that I don't have to do all of the work on that, to try and keep the balance between the two. Although one of the most recent hires that I brought in that I think will help me with a lot more of this balance is I just hired my wife to assist in some of the
Sure,
management.
that's a good idea?
I think I recognize where that may be difficult, but she helped me build it. She just finished up a tour on active duty in the Navy herself, and so now she's coming back to work with me. She helped me build the firm. She's been with me every step of the way as a true partner anyway. Now she's just actually home all day to be able to actively engage with it. So I'm hoping that'll help me with the balance.
Well, I wish you luck in that endeavor. During the pandemic, my wife and I were both home working together, and it definitely posed its challenges. With that, I'd love to throw things open to the audience if there's questions for our panel.
Everybody's just tweeting. Oh, there's somebody in the back. I see a hand.
Back. Awesome.
Just, could you talk about your online courses? Do you use a particular platform? Have you tried different ones? Could you share a little bit about your experience there?
So the question is talking about what online platform I'm using?
The forms, I think.
What was the last part?
For courses, I'm sure that you do some online courses.
Yeah. Okay. So for online courses, it's kind of evolved, and that's like another piece of advice. Don't worry about it being perfect. Things are gonna change over time, and that's okay. So I initially have built things on a product called ClickFunnels. It's really easy to just create different modules. It's drag and drop. You don't need to have any coding experience. Now, because I've been doing my subscription-based law practice for 3 or 4 years, I have a WooCommerce. It's a WordPress website. If these words don't mean anything to you, it's okay. Just Google it. You can figure it out. So I actually have a content management system in my website that I can sort of make some content courses. So I'm trying that right now. But ClickFunnels is super easy. You can also use things like Teachable. There are a ton of tools. I think you can find a million apps or tools to solve the problem. The bigger problem is containing the idea and the product and making sure that it's something that people want and that's something that you have an opportunity to offer to people when they can't afford your services, or even if they can, maybe it's ancillary. Really, the technology is rarely the hard part. The hard part is containing your ideas and packaging it in a way that's digestible to other humans in 8th grade English. And so, ferreting out some of the ethics issues and making sure it's all okay to do and how that's going to work. Very rarely for me is the tech platform for delivering it the thing that's the hardest ever. I have a mind mapping tool I don't have any ability to give you a link, but if you talk to me after, or you just go on hackyourpractice.lawyer, which is my lawyer stuff website, and look for the mind mapping tool, you should be able to find that. And that can help sort of contain your greatness.
Other questions right in the back, in the middle?
Thank you. I was wondering, I feel like to scale for the corporate law, it's easier to go through technology, but when we are talking about litigation, it's really going through more HR. So I was wondering if there's a way to combine both.
To combine corporate and litigation?
What I mean is there a way more to use technology to scale litigation?
Well, I mean, litigation, it still relies upon people. And so, there are definitely a lot of great tools out there, with some of the e-discovery and things like that. I've tried some of the software that'll help you, like AI, write your briefs. I haven't found one that I liked yet, but litigation is definitely one of those things that it is still people intensive, but you can use technology to build a team to do things in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do before. Because you used to have your whole litigation team in an office with boxes of paper files and all that kind of stuff. Now all the discovery and everything is all electronic, all text searchable and things like that. And I've handled major cases, big the $300 million securities fraud case right now, where the whole case is being operated out of 3 lawyers in their basements, in their respective basements, using all this, where we each have login to access the discovery together. When we're drafting motions, that all is on a shared platform, Clio documents, and so it's the technology enhances the ability of the people to work together without having to be physically co-located. So, and I do it with teams that are very dispersed, but the same is true even if you're all in one town and you just happen to be a few blocks from each other in your houses. But I mean, I've prepped cases with people in multiple time zones, and and it also allows you to if you do have multiple firms on it, sharing across platforms like that, and it works very well. So yes, I definitely believe that you can use the technology to significantly scale up and enhance your litigation capabilities. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Question over here.
Hi. Aside from COVID, what's the biggest unforeseen challenge you faced when scaling your business?
What is the question?
Sorry.
There's like a weird
So-
echo.
We're getting an echo.
For the mic.
Aside from COVID, what's the biggest unforeseen challenge you faced when scaling your law practice?
What's besides COVID, what is the biggest unforeseen challenge that we've faced?
Honestly, COVID wasn't really a challenge for me.
I know, me either. I was already virtual before that.
It was, well, so during COVID, I grew. The only thing that really COVID affected
But what
me.
is the
Well, no, no.
biggest unforeseen challenge?
I'm
Not
gonna-
how
I'm
great
gonna-
we handled COVID.
Well, I'm thinking of, I'm delaying while thinking of the right answer.
While you think, it's hard to think of because it's like some of these things it's like so granular over so much time. But being so much closer to the starting of scaling as far as human aspect goes, the biggest unforeseen challenge for me has not been technology or coming up with ideas, because I can do that all day long. But the going from like, I have a team of 2 people to now all of a sudden I have 6, and like, oh God, you have to like get everything out of my head and like document all these processes, and nobody knows how anything works, and we're like the tuition you have to pay on training people and creating the training materials. That for me was the biggest unforeseen. Like I knew that it would be a challenge, but I did not really fully appreciate. It's like parenting. You're having a baby, and like the baby's going to be a lot of work, but then the baby comes, and you're like, oh my God. So for me, adding more people to my team was more work than I thought it was going to be, and it really took a lot more out of me and my cohort to get them up to speed. And I think the length of time it takes to like train somebody in was an unforeseen challenge. Has been my biggest unforeseen challenge.
Thank you for giving me time to think. Actually, yeah, a slightly different aspect of the same theme with people. The biggest unforeseen challenge to me was having some former employees that were probably not as trustworthy as they should have been, and figuring that out from a fully remote environment. Because if you have an employee who is, whether untrustworthy or just, not motivated, and they're sitting right in front of you, it's a whole lot easier, to suss that out very quickly and to say, okay, you're not working out, you got to go. Whereas in a remote environment, it takes a little bit longer, and people can, unfortunately, people do take advantage a bit more. And my wife always yells at me that, notwithstanding being a criminal lawyer and seeing some of the worst of society, she's like, you still have this unending faith in humanity. Why don't you realize that people are trying to steal from you? And so I think that would be the biggest unforeseen challenge. We actually recently got a virtual office in the metaverse. Through a company called Verbella, where I honestly thought it was a really weird looking thing, like a video game where everybody has their avatars and they walk around this virtual video game office. But I was actually, after getting the demo and actually playing with it, they very much changed my mind that even though it does seem to be this silly video game, it does give you a much better interaction with your people of being in the same virtual space and being able to, walk over to each other's desks, talk to each other, and, just simply seeing somebody's avatar there and walking past and saying hello gives a much better connection than if somebody is, kind of out of sight, out of mind, and maybe I don't call them for a few days or something because I'm busy with something else.
I'm not going to have an office in the metaverse. I love that you do, though.
That's exactly what I said a few months ago, though, by the way. It was definitely one of those things where somebody sent this thing to me and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. I was laughing about it. I was looking at it and then I'm like, oh, wow, that actually is interesting. And, within days of actually getting it, I actually had built a much better relationship with my admin team. So
That's interesting.
I did not expect it at all. And if I were sitting out there listening to me, I'd be laughing at me right now because it makes no sense what I'm saying here, but it actually is true.
Well, I assume some of you have your phones and you're kind of looking at them right now. Hopefully a signal went over to Meta. Mark Zuckerberg's probably toasting some champagne because somebody's actually using Meta.
No, not his. Verbella.
Verbella. Okay.
Virbela.
It's a Zuck-free metaverse
Even better.
office.
Yes.
Well, we're pretty much at time. I'd love to thank our two fantastic panelists, and thank you for attending as well. I hope all of you have a great rest of your ClioCon and enjoy the rest of the conference.